Howdy gamers, in this video I'm going to be going over the runes for Ziggs and explaining why they're good and what I think you should run or when you can look to run certain runes and then the values that different runes will give him, and then a little bit of an exploration of like what he potentially could run if nerfs and whatnot were to happen. So starting off with the keystones, I think that everyone's really misguided with Arcane Comet, as Arcane Comet is just by far the most ran rune on Ziggs, and it's actually not that useful for him. The damage that Arcane Comet's going to build up throughout the laning phase is really insignificant, and then even at the later stages of the game, it's not good at all, because Ziggs' poke is built up through his levels in his Q and then through his itemization. To have poke in your rune is like, it's just not as useful, and really when you see the numbers, it's mostly about the numbers that it's just not good. Even if you were to run it with Scorch, by the time that you actually start dealing damage with your poke, which is about around level 9, and even when you're at that point, what is Arcane Comet really doing for you? It's adding like maybe 60 damage and then a little bit of damage with Scorch. Other champions just use this better, and since Ziggs already deals so much base damage with his abilities, I think that's where you should look to get his damage, not so much in his runes. The other runes in the tree are all really good for Ziggs, the high value ones being Mana Flow Ban, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm, Mana for free, cooldown reduction for free, and ability power for free. All of these are really what's doing the heavy lifting with this rune page, but you don't have to run Arcane Comet to get these. So I think that, I just think that it's really strange that this champion in particular, everyone's just off on it. A champion that uses Arcane Comet in the mid lane really well is Vel'Koz, because he has a slow on his Q, and that's his main poke ability. And whenever he gets to the point in the game in which he starts spamming that and it's meaningful, the damage that Arcane Comet is dealing is meaningful as well. With Ziggs, that's just not the case. You'll be lucky to get like 100 damage off with this keystone in a fight in the mid to late game. So I think that the keystone that you should be looking to run is Dark Harvest, as with Ziggs, it's very easy to get champions in this threshold. It also gives you access to extra damage against champions once you've poked them out. So you land a QE ult, just one auto might kill the champion, or would chunk them more, or would give you a reward for poking them in the first place, because with Dark Harvest, the champion only has to be below 50% health for you to get Dark Harvest, and with Dark Harvest the damage stacks up. So you're building up a reward for damaging the enemy, poking the enemy, or killing them altogether. And then it gives you access to damage that will help you kill the enemy at meaningful stages of the game, because in the early game, it doesn't matter that you're missing out on a poke keystone. Ziggs isn't poking many champions out of lane, and if he is, it's not because of the damage that's added from Arcane Comet or Scorch. In most cases, there'll be lanes where you could potentially win it with or without it. But I do think that Dark Harvest is a better keystone, and that the domination tree is pretty useful for Ziggs as well. And everything that you wanted from the sorcery tree, you can still get in the secondary runes. So with Dark Harvest, it puts you in the domination tree. For the second row here, I think your best option is Taste of Blood. Taste of Blood acts as a really strong laning tool, giving you more effective HP throughout the laning phase. With Taste of Blood, you heal whenever you damage an enemy champion, and that heal is based on your level and is only on a 20-second cooldown. This just helps you in every single ranged matchup, and even into melee matchups. Any damage you could be taking from minions, Taste of Blood is going to help offset a lot of that without having to use a health pot, for example. And in general, it's just putting you at higher amounts of HP at all stages of the laning phase. It really falls off in the mid to late game, but Ziggs' scaling through his levels and his itemization is going to take precedent over all of that. So you can look at it as a rune that helps you get through the early game, and then your scaling is going to take off anyways. So why have a rune that would help your late game or like help your damage in the early game when you could have a rune that helps you survive and farm in the early game, which is exactly what Ziggs wants. For the third rune, I think that all of these are kind of whatever for Ziggs. I think Ghost Pro is probably your best bet. You're really choosing how you get the bonus ability power from these. With Zombie Ward, it's through clearing wards. With Ghost Pro, it's through placing wards. And with Eyeball Collection, it's through getting kills and assist. I think Ziggs could use any of these, but with Eyeball Collection, you have to be getting kills and assists for it to be useful. With Ghost Poro, you just have to be placing wards. With Ghost Poro, whenever you place a ward and it expires, it places a Ghost Poro, which acts as like a ward until an enemy champion enters its radius. so it can still be providing you vision around areas. Most importantly, the pixel bushes for Ziggs, and then if an enemy comes near it, then it gives you a danger ping, and whenever you spawn a Ghost Boro, you get bonus ability power for doing so. So if you wanted to abuse it, you could just spam your trinket on cooldown, but even if you're using the trinket pretty normally in the laning phase, then you're able to build up Ghost Boro just by naturally warding in the laning phase and then into the mid game. So pretty generally useful rune. You do have to watch out if you're swapping to blue trinket early, as you won't be able to build up Ghost Boro, but other than that, it's a pretty, like, it just happens on its own, and then the ability power gained from it is just generally useful. You can build up 30 ability power with this, and then you'd be getting that faster than you could get it from Gathering Storm in almost all cases. For the 4th rune, I think that Ultimate Hunter's your best bet. As Ziggs, his ult does get on a pretty low cooldown, and in general, all the other runes in this row are pretty useless. You could have healing on abilities, and you can have out of combat movement speed or active item CDR if you were building like the glacial items. But I think with Ultimate Hunter, synergizes with what Ziggs wants to do, which is just throw his Q on cooldown, and then if that actually lands, and he could just throw the ult, and then if you're chunking out someone, then you probably put your team in a winning position, and then if a fight were to happen later, let's say around an objective, then your ult would be up again. So just gives you more opportunities to poke out the enemy, and then with that gain advantages. And with Ultimate Hunter, it's based off bounty hunter stacks, so you have to get unique kills and assists to reduce the cooldown on your ult, but that's pretty easy for Ziggs because he can damage almost every single champion in the context of a fight, because he has 4 AoE abilities, my bad. For the secondary runes, I think you should be looking for something in the sorcery tree, as they're all really high value. I think Monoflow Band Transcendence is probably your best bet, because even though Gathering Storm does give you infinite scaling, in solo queue, it's not so necessary, and then the benefit of Transcendence is so high, and it just matches your like mid-game spike a lot faster, and through that, you're able to gain more advantages, and then also capitalize on when Ziggs is his strongest, because he's strongest in the mid-game, and then could kind of fall off late game. So having something like Gathering Storm doesn't work out as well. And the benefit of having Transcendence is just more Qs, way more Qs. With Monoflow Band, hitting an enemy champion with an ability permanently increases your maximum mana by 25 up to 250, so that's a Sapphire Crystal for free, and then also a lot of Q cast off that, and then whenever you reach that 250 bonus mana, you restore 1% of your missing mana every 5 seconds. So this helps you stay, obviously, with enough mana to fight with, but more importantly, it's based off your missing mana, so even if you're spamming to like the wire where you have one more cast to your ability, it helps you have just enough to actually cast the last ability if you needed it. For Transcendence, you gain 10% cooldown reduction whenever you reach level 10, and then excess cooldown reduction is converted into ability power. This is really, really solid, as your one item spike is probably going to give you 20% CDR whether you're building Ludens or GLP, and then with Transcendence it puts you at 30, and then with blue buff it's putting you at 40. So you can have a one item 40% CDR Ziggs, which is really insane in the mid game. And then if you end up itemizing any extra cooldown reduction just naturally in your build, and whenever you get blue buff, that's also going to turn into ability power, which is just more damage for Ziggs. So literally the most valuable runes in the sorcery tree you can get without even having to have the sorcery tree primary for Ziggs. If you're to run something like Scorch, I think it would be pretty misguided for the same reason, as just try to spike mid game and don't really concern yourself with the poke in the early game, because if you're going to kill your lane opponent in the early game, it's going to happen with or without Scorch and Arcane Comet altogether. So it also just has really bad synergies with what Dark Harvest and then Taste of Blood would be trying to do. Like Taste of Blood, you're trying to survive the laning phase. Scorch, you're trying to win the laning phase. Like, pick one, man. If you needed to, you could also run Nullifying Orb. With Nullifying Orb, whenever you take magic damage that would reduce you below 30% HP, you gain a shield that blocks magic damage. So against champions like Karthus, Syndra, Vigar, etc., Nullifying Orb's just going to give you a lot more safety against them, especially like if they're flashing on you and shit. So missing out on the mana from Monoflow Band is kind of whatever if you are in these matchups. So consider running that. And then for the second, other options in the secondary runes, I don't really think come close to sorcery, because all of this just works so well together. You just have so much scaling into the mid game, and it just helps you spike so quickly with all of these. So let's say if you were to run like precision with maybe presence of mind and then cut down or coup de grace, like yes, this gives you more damage, but you have to get kills and assist for presence of mind to be useful. And then with cut down, the extra damage that it's adding, with Ziggs, he's really good at killing squishy targets. If your main damage should be on the enemy ADC and then maybe the enemy support, and it's just more important to have more cooldown reduction to just dish out more abilities than it would be to have more damage against tanks, like whenever you're against them. Cutdown will also help you against bruiser champions, but it's kind of the same deal. It's mostly your team's job to kill those champions, as Ziggs' advantage is his higher range. So you should be looking to throw your abilities past those champions into their allies squishy champions, mainly their ADC and then probably their mid laner. Presence of Mind isn't bad. It's a really, really solid rune, pretty much doing the same thing that Mana Flow ban wants to do. With Presence of Mind, takedowns restore 20% of your maximum mana and then permanently increase it by 100. So basically in a fight, you might never run out of mana, but champions like Caston use this a lot better, where they are exactly exhausting their entire mana pool in a fight. Ziggs doesn't do that. He's always about like 30% mana at the least usually. So I don't think that rune is as valuable. In the resolve tree, none of these are going to help you. If you have a losing lane, none of these are going to help you even then. So bone plating would be maybe the most useful for Ziggs. With the inspiration tree, it's like the worst of both worlds. What precision offers is more damage in unique ways, and then what sorcery offers is a very consistent mid game spike. What inspiration offers is a little bit of power at the end of early game, because you could have magical footwear and biscuits, you could have magical footwear dematerializer. All of these are just really luxuries for Ziggs, as he just doesn't need them. Regardless of the matchup, he just doesn't need to save 300 gold on magical footwear, because his boot spike isn't really that important. You're going to get to Swordpin boots at about the same pace anyways, and then getting them any earlier doesn't matter at all. And then the cooldown reduction from Cosmic Insight isn't as useful, because 5% from level 1 to the end of the game isn't as useful, and then you don't get the conversion of the 10% into ability power with Transcendence. And then with the biscuits, it's a bad version of Presence of Mind or Mana Flow Band with the mana provided from them. The benefit of biscuits would be if you were exactly out of mana in the laning phase and it would take one or two more ability casts to kill your lane opponent, then biscuits would help you do that. But since you're usually running TP in the laning phase, and you can also have double Doran's, Lost Chapter, Corrupting Potion, you have tons of options to not run out of mana in the laning phase. And to do it with these runes is just whack. And then with Minion Dematerializer, I don't think Ziggs needs it at all, because I'm pretty sure he just kills the wave regardless, unlike some champions. So best secondary options are probably these. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Ziggs runes. I think that Dark Harvest is just, everyone's missing the mark, man. Everyone. This is Arcane Comet on Varus. Everyone is just so off. Dark Harvest just works out so much better. You Q, you E, you W, you R, and then they're probably dead. One auto attack with the passive in Dark Harvest, they are dead. Versus Arcane Comet dealing, 60 damage. Wow, cool. That's awesome. 50 damage in the lane phase that's going to be healed by either a health potion, the champion's abilities, or a corrupting potion. Whatever, man. The other rune options that you could potentially have would be Summon Airy. This would give you more power in the laning phase if you were trying to really all in your laning phase, but doesn't work out that well for Ziggs, because other champions like Zoe just would do what he would be trying to do in the early game with Airy a lot better than he could ever do it, because Ziggs' Q cooldown is lower or too long in the early game, and then his other basic abilities aren't strong enough most of the time. And then since he's a long range champion, it just doesn't scale as well, because the cooldown of Airy is how long it takes it to come back to you. So whenever you would throw a Q mid to late game, then it just wouldn't come back at any meaningful time, and then the damage that it'd be dealing wouldn't be as meaningful. The utility options in Glacial Augment and Unsealed Spellbook I don't think are as good for Ziggs either, because he just deals so much damage that it makes Dark Harvest useful. Since he's so long range too, I think Glacial Augment loses a lot of value, because with champions that use Glacial Augment really well are mages that have a lot of range, can build like Twin Shadows GLP, and then also they have high base damages, mostly like they're medium range, and that's when GLP is the best, because they usually have tools to deal with champions that would dive onto their team, and then they can control those champions with the slows from GLP and then the rest of their kits. Champions like Vigar. But with Ziggs, he's just long range. So even if you have these slows, they're just not doing a lot. You could slow the enemy, and then as you're running into them, they engage on you. Like, what's the point? And then if they're engaging on you and you use the GLP slow, it's like, why didn't you just cast Minefield and then also have runes to just deal more damage? So I think Glacial loses a ton of value for Ziggs for that reason. In the early game, it doesn't do anything meaningful either. With Unsealed Spellbook, you could gain access to summoner spells and also provide utility to your team through that, but again, other champions just do that better. Ziggs basically has 4 damaging abilities and should be looking to provide utility to his team through the damage that he deals and through abusing his range. With Unsealed Spellbook, you could have like a Ignite and a Heal and an Exhaust in a fight, but I don't think it compares to the damage that you could deal. So yeah, those are the variations I suppose you could run, but I don't think they come close to just simply just deal more damage and dish out more abilities. That's effectively what these runes are. So that's my thoughts on that. I can't believe that Arcane Comet is the most ran rune on Ziggs, but it's a crazy world we're living in. Yeah, like, favorite, subscribe, or else twitch.tv/ShawryNelson, links in the description. I'll never stream, don't ask me to. Bye-bye. Hope this helps, man. Really, it's just like Arcane Comet on Varus. Everyone's in this, like, purgatory of a mind state or something. They're crazy, and I'm the one that's right. They're crazy out there.